demonstrate in writing formally. There was allegations of perjury that never saw the light of day. There were allegations of defeating the ends of justice, of which there was no police officer that had contacted myself nor my client. Remember, I'm not my client's attorney for the first time. We have a history in terms of her overall life. Thereafter, we are told that there were people who were bought or paid for. I don't want to use certain terms, but let us try and be as subtle on the allegation as possible. By my client. Now my client has pulled the trigger. Can the defense determine with decisiveness what it is that they want to allege? So in terms of that docket, it is not to the knowledge of ourselves.
Ms. Mansami, Crisalda Lewis from SABC Television. So you have not seen the second docket that has come out in court, where we understand in that docket, your client, Ms. Kelly Khumalo, together with other occupants in the house, in that docket, it suggests that they should be the suspects that are answering to allegations of killing Senzo Muyiwa in the Khumalo'S home back in 2014. Do you have any idea of that docket?
Absolutely none. All I have heard of in an interview with Golani was there was a release from the NPA regarding information of the possibility of a note that was written by an investigating officer. To the extent of a docket, and Crisalda, the one thing you will realize is this is the reason the watching brief is critical. In a matter where a victim is a state witness, as well as the daughter of the deceased being now exposed because Tinga obviously is young, is the fact that we would then be able to have access and understand what the environment, what the dockets, what the allegations are. When you are even contested on the issue of having a charge sheet which is presented in open court to the world, it makes one very curious about what then does the defense for 124 suggest when they say they feel intimidated and uncomfortable with myself.
Ms. Mansami,
because that information is being withheld, Crisalda.
So do you feel prejudiced?
Indeed.
Does your client feel prejudiced?
There's prejudice, there's discrimination. As an attorney, as an officer of the court, I had applied to the prosecution with the acceptance of with the registrar, with the approval by the defense 124 and defense for 5, and there was no objection. You will recall this, day 1, day 2, day 3, no objection. Even when the objection was raised, it was dismissed by Judge Mamela. So my question is, why is it that information is more accessible to 1010 than it is to myself in an incident where, and we have been told clearly by the NPA, and I've said this to you previously, my client is not a suspect. That was said to me on 3 occasions. There was a point when Advocate Baloy indicated that she may not even be called as a state witness. Subsequently, a few weeks later, after the 3rd adjournment, we were informed that she may be called as a witness. So at this point, ours is now to understand, with the allegations being leveled prematurely, that opens a can of worms. To suggest to an investigating officer, your first witness in the matter, that there is an alleged eyewitness who will testify to such an allegation, a person who is post de facto the incident, who is not present at the scene when the crime occurs, it's nefarious.
Ms. Mansami, are you planning on taking any action in terms of these allegations?
I'm consulting with my client this evening, and I can confidently advise that there will be steps that are going to be advanced.
What
Can you
kind
tell
of
us
steps?
of her reaction in terms of hearing those allegations coming out that she subsequently killed the father of her child?
At first, when I did not want to call her, she was on set at the moment. I sent her a text, I sent her the clip, and I just requested her to just breathe, okay? When we had spoken, her reaction was, I'm a mother. My child was 3 months old at the time. How dare he? What do they want from me? Because it started, and this is where I gave you the background of the intimidation. We must hand her over to the police, etc. And she then said to me, we are going to now break the silence. So this is where we are at. She's confident. Look, Kelly, you know she's a person of high spirit. You don't get to that level without character development and building. I don't need to describe her to you.
And at this point, has the state then indicated that we will be calling her as a witness as well as the others in the house?
The state in first instance, when we were called in for consultation, we were then later, just a few hours or a day before, told there's no need to interview her further. Remember, we've been through serious interrogations in the past with the ballistics, with forensics, and she described the events of the incident clearly, even though she was very seriously interrogated. We were then told, no, there's no need for her to come in, and we then conceded, that's fine, as long as it is in writing. We received that confirmation in writing from Advocate Baloy. We are going to file submission in terms of clarification with regard to her being, because the thing that we've been saying very clearly and very consistently, and this is what she said to me yesterday as well, I want my day in court.
So she wants to testify. She wants to be a
Yes,
witness.
absolutely.
Yeah.
She doesn't care what level she goes in. She wants her day in court.
Now, Ms. Masami, I want to canvass some of the issues that came out with the defense in terms of how this crime scene was treated. They are alleging that it was contaminated, it was compromised, that the removal of Mayua's body, that he actually died on the scene, and that his removal or them taking him to the hospital was actually just to compromise further that crime scene. I understand your client was one of those who rushed him to the hospital. The defense alleging that they went to dump his body there.
What is your question, Linda?
Are you concerned that there was an effort to compromise the crime scene?
Okay, let's be practical and pragmatic. Okay. We're dealing with a house of what size is it? Okay. How many people, adults, are in that house? Including those who are potential robbers or the ones who had committed the act of murder. Is it practically possible for there not to be movement and not to be some kind of confusion that is, it's hysteria, it's a robbery? From the witness statements, and I'm sure that you may have had sight of some of them, you will see that it is clear it was mayhem. It's if it is described as a robbery with aggravated circumstances on count 3, murder, attempted murder of Zandile Khumalo. Let's talk about understanding contamination. In the law of evidence, one has to understand that, firstly, evidence that is procured, and remember, when a Sergeant Musia starts to discuss and disclose the issues around time, there was a time that the Senzumiri was rushed to the hospital. In between that time, the house is being cordoned off, people are being called, there are people who are being informed. Remember, one of the things that many don't understand is that there's also the medical report of the time of death of the hospital or the doctor who treated Senzo would then be needed. So that's evidentiary proof and fact. We cannot be slamming and throwing allegations into the air without saying, but the medical report, because the docket should be in the possession of defense 1 to 5. We can't be saying that without testing, here's the medical report, here's the time of death. To make such spurious allegations, for me, is an abolition of the legal process, entering into some kind of sensationalist media popularity situation. I think we need to be practical and understand. For me, it's abhorrent. Look, I do understand that there is significant interest in the matter. We know this. My client has been through public persecution and all manner of things. However, practically, there are witnesses that should be called. The state must call those witnesses who were in the house. We don't want situations where, and we want to know who's this eyewitness, by the way.
Do you believe there was any tampering of the scene there?
Look, I cannot say because you had, Musia even says there's ballistics. Remember, there is Mangena who's doing ballistics. There's Musia and there is Ndlovu and others who are doing forensics. Then you've got your police officers and you've got your senior task team that's doing high-level collection. In between, and this incident occurs unfortunately at the latter part of an evening, you've got a space that is, at some point there is evidence to the effect that the people were kept in one room. Let us wait for the witnesses to tell us what happened, to corroborate their evidence, to corroborate what happened, and to corroborate then the testimony that comes from the investigating officer, from forensics and ballistics. Because the ballistics report will deny or confirm the nature of the weapon that was used. And to place then the forensics, who's meant to collect blood, fingerprints, and any other substance or on the scene, to place that burden of responsibility. And if you recall, on the first day of Musia's cross-examination, he indicated, but my responsibility is forensics. Ballistics will handle the issue of the nature of the weapon. The other issue is the nature of the weapon. The weapon that is being tossed around is one that was handed over to the police.
Ms. Khumalo'S, I just want to then canvass this issue of two dockets, two investigations, one crime. In your expertise as a legal expert, is this unprecedented? Is this strange to have two investigations and two basically different scenarios on what took place that night?
Look, it depends on what level it is. You might have instances where a matter is being investigated by the police and then being investigated by the Hawks for different purposes because of the nature and severity of the crime. It is not something that I don't want to respond to allegations. First, we must have confirmation of those dockets. I want sight of it. But let us, for the purposes of objectivity, suggest that there were two. Those are answers that must be provided by the police commissioner depending on why there were two investigations. You might find, and I want to reiterate, you might find that where there's one investigation relating to a forensics issue and the one is ballistics, you can regard that as two investigations equally because ballistics is different from forensics, not to the largest degree, but to some. So I am not going to vehemently, because I don't have possession of such information. Where I can with confidence say what I can, I will, but not just randomly disclose that factually it's not possible. And up until that point, which is why our submission, which will follow to the High Court for access, etc., then becomes necessary because client is unaware of this. I'm unaware. If that was the case, I would have also been brought into confidence to say, okay, you will have. I was actually informed by Advocate Baloy that I will have access to the documents. I mean, everybody sees it, the cameramen yourselves see it in court. What is this need to keep the information that is running through the mill away from myself and my client. And then to anticipate that we would respond in a manner that would be, let's fold our arms and embrace the system and the process. No, we can't do that. The allegations of yesterday, the issue of the dockets, of all of those matters of tampering of evidence, etc., we want to be able to make submission on it so that we understand. And client must be able to say, okay, this is what happened, you know. So those are things that will come to the fore.
How does your client feel about the allegation that was made that Central Miyiwe had died on the scene, and taking him to the hospital was part of this whole cover-up plan to conceal, quote unquote, how Central Miyiwe died, that he was taken to the mortuary to be dumped there? How does your client feel about that? You mentioned a bit earlier on to say she's feeling a bit aggrieved because she has a child with the deceased.
Let's go back to the medical report. I'm surprised that the medical report, you know, in a normal course of law, one would verify the suggestion of concealment or dumping a body in a hospital with verification of a medical report of the time of death. We had a very brief discussion, and she mentioned to me that when he had gone into the medical room where he was being looked after by a doctor, at that moment she was praying and her mother was crying, and that's when she discovered that he had passed. Because from that point onwards, to her knowledge, she was alive. And remember, she was not alone in the vehicle. So, for me, Griselda, I want to stress, let us rely on fact in this case. My client has been through intensive 8 years of allegation. And now there were allegations of hiring hitmen, allegations of X, Y, and Z. It has now come to this. So for me, I would rather, if the defense was being legalistic, factual, and based on evidence, they would rely on the report of the doctor, which could not have been tampered with, which was then in, because it's a cold case, that medical report would then be in the possession of the investigators. So I've spoken to ENCA in the past, and I've said to them, she tried to save his life by rushing him to the hospital. It's not an issue of, I mean, that is preposterous. I must say that is preposterous. For one to even think that you can think that at that moment, to want to then conceal a father of a 3-month-old child, all of this, I mean, I don't even think that we should be responding to it. However, the more silent we remain, the more notorious the matter becomes. I don't see it as a case that is developing. I see it as an underdeveloping. Because it is becoming more and more, you know, I don't mean to demean this, but almost caricature-like, where these are characters in a scenario that can be recreated and created at any point. The city press will even inform me that at one point we had gone to the ombuds regarding the allegations of these alleged bought individuals that were met in a mall. Now, where did that come from? From that, so we need to know really